Welcome to the 11th episode of Savikalt Sanchar, our monthly webinar where we aim to cover everything about health and wellness. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Bimla Sharma join us. With over 39 years of experience in anesthesiology and perioperative medicine, she is currently the head of palliative care at Sir Gangaram Hospital, New Delhi. Today, she will share her expert insights about palliative care and perioperative care. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you, Ruchi.
Ma'am, very first question. Many patients in a palliative setting struggle to articulate the pain that they have. They're not able to really convey how they're feeling. Can you share how healthcare professionals are trained to identify and address this invisible pain that's called palliative?
It's a very important question because pain is something, a very, very common symptom. And in fact, the most common symptom why the patient lands up in hospital. And most of us know about physical pain, and which is quite obvious, like if the patient has trauma, some road traffic accident, or some patient who is in labor, or there is, a case of burns. So all these are obvious causes. But apart from that, like you talked about invisible pain, that is a very, very important entity. And in fact, Dame Cicely Saunders, who founded the hospice movement, and she gave the concept of total pain, that pain is not just a physical, the physical symptoms, but one can have psychological pain, social pain, spiritual pain. And these are, very, very important. And in fact, these are the important causes for, producing invisible pain. So, the palliative care physicians are kind of trained to evaluate these categories of pain. And for that, of course, like you said, because of the training, we learn to detect this invisible pain, and we also learn to evaluate and treat. So first thing is that whenever such a patient comes, you should have especially the patients who are very quiet, not opening up, should have a high suspicion that when you are talking to them, it is very, very important that you provide a safe environment where the patient feels comfortable, reassure them so that they open up and they come out with their problems. Physical pain will be, like I said, of course, burns, wounds, they are pretty obvious. But in physical pain also, there are situations where you do not get much on history. You may not find, anything on investigations. Say patients with fibromyalgia, patients with, backache. These are the common physical causes. And then psychological causes. The patients have emotional upset, and they could be anxious, they could be depressed, and especially a patient who is suffering from cancer. There are, so many lows, but simple thing, when the news is broken that you are suffering from cancer, so the patient feels so low, depressed. Then when you tell him about the treatment part, he gets very anxious. What kind of treatment? And again, when the patient is, in this journey, patient becomes all right. Then he's again worried about the disease, coming back. So, even if when the patient is cured, then there are other problems. So that constant fear of, having especially the cancer coming back is always there. So these patients could be anxious and depressed. And then there are social factors, financial issues. So there are so many reasons that, these cancer patients may have, like you rightly said, invisible pain. So whenever you talk to them, of course, like I talked about, providing safe environment where you are non-judgmental and your body language is such that the patient feels confident, then of course they will open up. And then you have to tell them that there is nothing wrong in having these problems. It's okay. It's okay not to be okay. And you can ask that, how have you been feeling lately? how is the life treating you? And you have to ask simple, open-ended questions so that the patient can elaborate and they can, come out with their problems. Not like yes or no. So
Yeah, that emotional connect is very
Yes,
important.
so that is
especially
very-
in palliative.
yeah, very, very important. And once the patient comes out with the problem, then you have to validate. You tell them, yes, you have to acknowledge that, they are suffering. Many times it happens that they talk about their problem, one does not even pay attention. So this validation that the patient is suffering, that you are suffering, that is very, very important. So for that you have to do active listening.
Patient just needs reassurance from the doctor.
Yes.
Just he'll be fine. That's
Yes,
all.
very true.
Yeah.
And in addition, like once you have you know about the problem, then how do you assess the pain? Like how much intensity is there? So there are different tools. You have tools for assessing the psychological pain, where you screen these patients for anxiety and depression, and then of course for the physical pain, like simple. There are numeric rating scale, like patients from the village background, we can say that how much pain we have, like 0 is no pain, no 0 paisa and 100 paisa. Like when we were students, whenever these patients came, we said how many annas, so that way we said. And then this pain can also be there in patients who are old, who have cognitive impairment. They cannot speak, they cannot express, and there are also small children, pre-verbal, so they also can't communicate. And then also patients who are in intensive care units, who are on ventilator, they have a tube down their windpipe, so how will they speak? So there are tools for that also.
Right. Ma'am, that brings me to the next question, that many families prefer shielding the patient from the full truth of their condition, especially when we talk about palliative care or end-of-life situations. How does this affect the care planning, and what is your approach in such cases? A lot of times the family does not tell, what exactly is happening, and the patient is in a gray area. He doesn't know what exactly is happening about his condition, the full truth.
Yeah, so this problem, especially in palliative care, is very, very common. Not only in India, but in the Southeast Asia, because of the socio-cultural issues, and medically we call it collusion. So it can be in business, education also, where 2 or more than 2 parties are involved, and they do not share the information among themselves. So in the palliative care setting, the parties involved are 3 parties: the patient, the family members, or the other caregivers, whoever they might be, and the healthcare provider, the doctor. So what happens in the West, what happens when the patient goes to the doctor? The patient will get the first-hand information. Okay, you are suffering from so and so. But here, along with the patient, there will be so many family members, and the patient is always shielded back. Even the doctor may not tell the patient that you have such a serious illness. So this collusion can be there between the patient and the caregiver, and also between the caregiver and the healthcare provider.
Ma'am, what is your approach in such cases where the family members are trying to shield from telling the patient about the condition?
So what we do, we have to, we focus on telling them the adverse effects of not telling the patient. And the management, the strategy is focused on that, to psychoeducate them. Because if you don't tell the patient, what happens that you lose trust, and you are obstructing the truth, and there are certain important decisions to be made, especially in cancer patients, regarding the treatment. And many times the treatment can be of many forms. So then after the treatment, patient may not respond to that. At times there are serious side effects. So all these have to be discussed with the patient. And then of course there are financial issues also. So you are taking the right of the patient away from him, the what we call the patient's autonomy. By law, by the we have this autonomy is an important ethical principle. where the patient has the right, because the disease is in the patient's body and he doesn't know about it and he has no say in the treatment.
Right.
Even if the whatever treatment, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, the patient is undergoing, the patient must know what is happening to his or her body. So this patient loses a right of autonomy. We cannot have shared decision making because patient is not able to participate. And then also the caregivers also among themselves, like who are the close ones, they may not tell some other important family member. So that also causes a lot of mistrust. So all these things are very, very important. And as such also the healthcare providers, they are also not comfortable, because you're not giving the patient is quite sick and you keep on saying no, everything is going to be all right. So you're giving false hope.
Right.
So that
That's
is a
not
very
right.
negative thing. So all these things are very, very important. And also, if the patient is otherwise okay but has a limited time, so if there is no collision, patient knows about it, he can give a proper closure. He can meet all his friends, he can do his unfinished work, and then he can attend to the other matters, financial matters, the banks and other things. So all these things can be easily done.
Right.
How do we take care of these problems? The simple thing is, we talk to the family members, because most of the time it is out of love. They don't want to share the bad news with the patient. They feel that the patient will not be able to make it. So first we talk to the family members and we tell them about the bad effects of not informing the patient, not taking the patient into confidence. And once they are ready, then only we tell the patient. And at times it has happened like they have taken 2 weeks or more, and we tell them, like, whenever you are ready, whenever you say that like you can't do it, we will pitch in. So many a times it has happened like that. Presently we are doing a study. In fact, we did a small study on that. So we have developed few educational videos and some written material, so which will intend to give it to the
Help the
patient.
family members also,
Yes.
that it's important to tell the patient.
Very, very important.
Right. So, ma'am, what are the biggest gaps that you see in how palliative care is practiced in India today? We already discussed some points, but particularly in pain relief and perioperative care, what is the gap which is there in palliative care in India?
Pain and perioperative care, you said, because pain is, as such, I said, a very common symptom. And plus in the cancer patients, pain can be once they go into, they have some kind of surgery, so the pain is going to get exaggerated. And then perioperative care means that in the post-operative period, I mean immediately before the surgery, during the surgery and post-surgery. So in India, like where you have a department of onco anesthesia, as well as like in AIIMS, they have the anesthetists are looking after the palliative care also. There, of course, things get simplified. But where you are only doing palliative care, the palliative physician, of course, I have a background of anesthesia, but then there are others who may not be, have that experience, may not be that comfortable. But so this kind of training may not be there. May not be.
That's the real gap.
Yeah,
Training.
being gap, because in the tertiary hospital, urban centers, it will be there. But what about the rural population? Surgery is being done at the district level or at some
Right.
other, hospital, big hospitals. So that problem is there. Then the second is about the drugs. You may not have the access to the narcotics. Because very often in this setting, the pain is going to be acute. So they will need highly potent drugs, which may not be available here. So the infrastructure might not be there. And plus the education. You have to educate the people.
So, following up with the same question, ma'am, now in India we see that there's more focus on home-based palliative care in our country. So, what are the challenges when we have to ensure the continuity and the quality of palliative care outside hospital setting?
Yeah. So this home care services, as such, they are not available at many places, especially in Delhi. of course, can support and can get their voluntary organization. They are doing a lot, but otherwise, Delhi has I would say that has a poor record, and all over, in fact, over the country, except Kerala is leading. They provide a lot of very good, excellent home care services. So we don't have trained people, and there are a lot of financial issues. And then providing home care, again, you need group of people, many people, multidisciplinary approach. It's not only the palliative physician, the patient is mostly bed bound. They can't come to the hospital. That's why they are being attended. Many a times they might be paralyzed also. So there's a lot of caregiver burden, whosoever is taking care of them at home. And then providing emergency treatment is going to be very, very difficult. And then financial, of course.
Yeah.
All these are issues.
In one of the sessions that I had attended, actually, ma'am said that people in India have this, sense, this mentality. They say that if there's an end of life situation, they say that I want to be at my home. I don't want to be in the hospital. That's where also palliative care becomes difficult, because the patient is also rigid that I want to be at my home. So that's also, I think, one of the reasons, that it becomes difficult for the doctor then to coordinate and give emergency care at home setting rather than
emergency care, I mean, for the things which are reversible. But if a patient is chronically ill, terminal illness, then of course many patients, in fact, many people opt to be at home.
Be at home, right? Ma'am, are there any innovations or lesser known practices that you've seen making a genuine difference, in palliative care in your clinical experience? Any practices like that?
Yes, I'll be talking again about Kerala, because they are the leaders in providing palliative care, and they have very good, excellent community services. And most of the community services are provided by people who looked after their own patients, like they were the caregivers. And especially when the patients are in the final stages, in the terminal phase of their lives, very often they have existential crisis, meaning like they actually question why they have come into the world, and they're generally unhappy. People who were very religious were going to the performing community services, going to the temples, or any of their worship place. They start questioning God, like, why did I get it? I haven't done anything wrong. So the doctors, who we have very, very poor training. In fact, we are very poor communicators also. In our formal education, we don't get any we don't have any lectures, no formal education about communication. So this if you ask me about spirituality, maybe because I have come into medicine, I might be knowing a little, but most of us do not have any we cannot enlighten about spirituality. But like this community people, community workers, they facilitate this process. They will talk to the patient, the family members, and they will the simplest would be talking to the religious leaders, I mean, and bringing them to the patient's home. The patients and the family members, they feel satisfied. But in fact, religion is very small part of spirituality. It's much, spirituality is much beyond this thing. But so this at the community level, these people, they facilitate this spiritual healing of the patient, which is so very, very important. And then, of course, they provide respite care, which can be provided by friends also. Like if a patient is sick, chronically sick, there is a lot of burden on the caregivers. They have to take care of the patient in a physical way. Say patient is lying in bed, patient has to be turned every 2 hourly, and you have to attend to the patient's body needs, apart from nutrition, that other things. And at the same time, you have to maintain dignity of the patient. So all these things are very important. So respite care is very, very important. That means you're giving relief to the caregivers of the patient, the family members of the patient. So the voluntary health workers, they may opt in for few hours they may help the family members, and this can be given at the hospital level also. In fact, like we don't have, such things in Delhi, but in South, in Bangalore, they have Karnashraya. And otherwise also, people can, provide all these services in the home also. But the usual constraints are there, that the space is less, and of course the financial problems are there. And then another thing is about telecommunication in providing palliative services at home. COVID, with all its negative points, did teach us about the communication part, that people in their houses, in their remote places, they can have the benefit of having medical consultation, medical services with the help of this advanced technology. So this has come in a big way. And of course, these are the main things I feel.
Right. Online consultation actually has made a difference and, brought the doctors and patients closer, especially rural areas. Not all innovation have to be technological, though this community service thing is also very helpful. And we have a lot of other treatments also that, the community comes together and gives the patient, helps the patient and the families.
Yes, very, very important, especially like you talk about it, and especially, when the transition period, if the patient is in the hospital and then you send the patient home. In the hospital, of course, so many people are looking after, doctors, nurses, paramedical staff. And once the patient goes home, then you have shortage of manpower. The patient may not have the desired bed. The oxygen is not there. So many things are not there. So this transition is very important. So if you have this facility, telecommunication, you talk to the relatives, you can monitor the patient and advise them accordingly. So this is something which is really very useful.
Ma'am, in your opinion, what can medical education in India do differently to ensure that healthcare experts, hospital staff, and caregivers are better equipped to offer compassionate, palliative informed care right from the beginning, right from when the patient is admitted to the hospital?
Yes, this compassion, empathy, very, very important in providing care, especially to the very sick. And as I said earlier, as doctors, we do not have any formal training in palliative or in, basic communication, how to break the bad news, how to inform the relatives that the patient is very sick, has suffered a cardiac arrest. Miscommunication has occurred many a times. You must have read in the paper, there are a lot of anger issues. Patients, they become, the relatives, they become violent. They cause a lot of damage to the property of the hospital. So we all know, and so much so, I don't know whether you heard or not. In Punjab, it happened. There was a doctor, orthopedic doctor, was assaulted on duty, and he lost his eye also. So it can be, at times, it can cause grievous injuries. So, so this communication, how to break the bad news, and how to discuss about the goals of care, because especially in cancer, when the disease is progressing, or when the disease is taken care of at different stages, maybe the patient is undergoing surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, so the patient has to be consult, and the decision has to be made jointly. You have to inform the patient, the relatives, because finances are also involved. So this we call the shared decision and the informed decision making. So these things are very important. So in the medical education, both for the doctors as well for the nurses, so this has to be in the basic curriculum. So, this part, palliative education, should be there, and not only just the theory lectures, but they must have hands-on training also. They can be sent to the connected to different NGOs or to some big hospitals where they will provide home care services.
Right. I think now with palliative care departments, being set up in different hospitals, it's also good that now the nurses and other healthcare professionals are getting to see it and learn at the hospital. Right?
Yes, very important. We keep on having updates, CMEs. So like every 2 year we regularly hold CMA for the nurses, where we train them for providing end of life care. So
That's also
education is
It's
very
very
important.
Ma'am, as someone who has worked closely in the ICU and perioperative care, how do you see the bridge between critical care and palliative care evolving, especially for non-cancer terminal illness like advanced heart, lung, or kidney diseases? How is it going to bridge?
Yeah, this is very very crucial, and the main difference is that in intensive care units where the critically ill patients are there, we again focus on the cure part, on curing the patient. And as palliative physician, we want to provide holistic care. In the palliative care, we not only focus on the patient but also the family members. And here the patient is critically ill, so many times they will undergo active interventions, like so many at times, if they are not breathing well, intubation, they might be on ventilator, and then the IV infusion, of course, many a times they need blood pressure support and all that. So in doing all this, the patient's psychological aspect and the other social issues and the financial aspect, they are all forgotten, because you are basically uh, centered on the cure part. So as palliative physician, we want to provide holistic care, so that we not only take care of the physical symptoms but also the other issues also. So that way it is evolving, and it's good to have a palliative physician in the ICU, embedded in the ICU only. Many people have that in Bangalore. I know my friend did a great job, and it is being appreciated also, because it is very important to have the palliative physician, not at the terminal stage when the patient is has limited lifespan, but it should be there right from the beginning, so that, and it has been seen that it provides good symptom relief, because you're not only taking care of the physical problems, but also paying attention to the emotional or the other psychological well-being of the patients as well as the family members. Then we do a lot of counseling. We are in we have good interactions with the family members, so they are they actively participate in the decision making. So that also makes them comfortable. So it has been seen that maybe we have better outcomes also, and if everybody cooperates, and if the at times you patient survival also
Will increase.
affected.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This session has been very enlightening, and I'm sure all our audience they know more about palliative care. They will know how palliative care operates, how and even healthcare professionals and other caregivers, how palliative care is changing, how the entire system of palliative care is changing and evolving in the country, thanks to hospitals like Gangaram, where we have palliative care now. Right from the beginning, we have a department especially where patients get full holistic care. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ruchi, for having me here, and I'm really passionate about the subject, and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.